You can count when you're happy. 1, 2, 3, 4. You can count when you're sad. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Or count when you're frightened. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Count when you're mad. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Counting is wonderful. Counting is marvelous. Counting's terrific and how.
Jodie Melville, another Kryptofreak with an ironic last name, is unhappily overweight. Her father has a greenhouse and she lives in Smallville. Sounds like a recipe for a Kryptofreak to me. She starts making veggie shakes that, unbeknownst to her, of course, are filled with Kryptonite, which makes her lose nearly all her excess weight overnight, but comes with the unfortunate side effect of having to constantly eat to stay alive. Meanwhile, like all eccentric sons of billionaires who get sent to manage plants in small towns, Lex is catching up on the local high school newspaper. Being a generally intelligent human being who really doesn't belong in this universe, he's beginning to think maybe all the weird stuff happening in Smallville really does have something to do with the meteor rocks, despite not having concrete evidence, which apparently everyone else who isn't a main character or a scientist in the show needs. Besides wanting to establish a good reputation for Luthor Corp, which a lot of people blame for everything, Lex also buys into this more readily because meteors made him permanently bald, and that's like a superpower, but he also hasn't been asthmatic or gotten any other illness since the meteor shower, and that's a lot more like a superpower. So he decides to fund Dr. Stephen Hamilton's research, who, despite sharing the same last name as a certain other genius scientist in Superman's lore who will pop up far later in the series, seems to have nothing whatsoever to do with him. He's the stereotypical local mad scientist who used to be a renowned researcher but has been completely shunned by the scientific community for believing that the meteor rocks can change cellular makeup. Naturally, for idiot lay people, things from beyond Earth must have all the same properties of things found on Earth. We're far enough into the show now that the writers seem to think it's time to remember Pete's in the show, so he gets to be that last victim who almost gets killed by the Kryptofreak just before Clark saves the day. Congrats, Pete. This week you've graduated to Lana's replacement while she's experiencing the equally horrifying predicament of having to attend her own birthday party and being mad at Clark. Jodie's eaten everything in the house and really needs some more body fat, and to her credit, really tries hard not to eat Pete before she finally transforms into the Violator. Clark shows up just in time to get affected by the tons of kryptonite in her greenhouse, stumble a little, and then somehow super speed Jodie away just as she tries to blow up the greenhouse to kill herself. In the end, Clark doesn't make Lana's party and she's mad, but then he rigs up a drive-in movie in his yard because of a sappy story she told him from her childhood. They watch Bugs Bunny because this is a Warner Brothers show, then credits. This seems to be a second attempt at the tragic Kryptofreak, and it's played much more sincere than Sean Kelvin, the heat vampire. Part of that comes naturally from the material. Sean was just a kid who couldn't stay warm, who used cute girls to get whatever he wanted, and sure, there's some commentary there, or at the very least, some innuendo, but here we've got an overweight girl who wants to get thin to fit in. That rhymes. It's easy to sympathize with her because, yes, she's a victim of an, on the whole, shallow society that objectifies women and expects everyone to look a certain way, but also because she's proactively trying to change her situation rather than just pouting about it like some other people we know. Jodie so far is the most well-rounded and understandable of the Kryptofreaks. She doesn't go crazy for no reason, she doesn't revel in murder, she doesn't have a crappy home life that turns her into a nut job before she conveniently gets superpowers. And the thing she really has going for her is that she wanted something before she was affected by kryptonite, and for a minute, it looks like the kryptonite gave it to her. It seems like a good thing, until the side effect rears its ugly head and she can't stop eating. And unlike Sean, she doesn't immediately start going after people. She eats everything she can get her hands on, including, in a particularly disturbing scene, a deer she hits with her car, before she finally kills the kid who constantly bullies her about her weight until she loses weight and then suddenly wants to sleep with her. And yes, as usual, our main conflict in a Smallville episode centers around murder. But let's stop taking this so seriously for just a second so I can say, sadly, I've met people kind of like this guy, and I was kind of okay with seeing him get what was coming to him. Not condoning Jodie's actions or anything, but knowing this is just a TV show, yeah, I was okay with that guy ironically getting all the body fat sucked out of him. Even still, Jodie is uncontrollably hungry and angry, and I actually bought that she'd do this. And she didn't enjoy it either. I love how hard she tries to get Pete to leave before she finally attacks him at the end. She realizes she's turned into a monster, and that's why she tries to kill herself in the end. The fact that she makes these terrible mistakes is why she goes through such terrible consequences, and the fact that she's not just plain evil is why she gets to live. The moral of this story, kids, is that this kind of change is hard and there are no shortcuts, which, if you've got to do a messagey episode, it's a good message. Oh, that and don't make up your own diet shakes with whatever happens to be lying around the house. So what we have is a really sad commentary on the pressure put on high school girls to be thin and the unnecessary attention placed on image. I almost wish there was some added commentary about the weight loss business too, where instead of making the Kryptonite diet shake herself, somebody else sells it to her. Because I was kind of fuzzy on why exactly she would even think drinking this random concoction from her greenhouse that she came up with would work. Of course, I guess then there'd be lots of people in Smallville with the giant Violator mouths eating everything in sight, and we'd have a real horror movie on our hands. Okay, never mind, that wouldn't work at all. Amy Adams is also really selling this character as someone we should care about rather than just another freak of the week. And that's not surprising since she's a real actress, now Academy Award nominated, and the actress who's just been cast to play Lois Lane in Man of Steel. What a twist of fate. Jarrell must have been involved. While he's pretty typical, I like the addition here of the recurring Stephen Hamilton. Or maybe I just really like Joe Morton. And check out Eureka if you've never given it a shot, where he plays another eccentric scientist, though a much nicer one. Again, more seeds planted for cool stuff that never really comes to fruition. It looks here like we might start getting an explanation about what properties the Kryptonite actually has, so the powers it gives people don't seem so arbitrary. And, as per usual, Lex is involved in the interesting subplot, as he's beginning to look for answers for the strange things happening in Smallville besides just investigating Clark. It becomes more personal for him, too, as we learn that he's never been sick since the meteor shower, but the meteor exposure could put him at risk for leukemia. At the end, when we find that he's not sick, it only deepens the mystery, which really isn't explored much again until seasons later. Maybe Lex does have a superpower. Maybe he can't get sick. Maybe he can't even die. Well, it's not good that all the good things I have to say about this episode have nothing to do with Clark, who's, the protagonist, or really any of our other main characters. He does a couple irritating things, which I'll address in a second, but the bigger problem is that while we've got a more believable and less just straight evil because we need a bad guy Kryptofreak, this is really Jodie's episode. Our main cast doesn't have nearly enough to do with her story. In fact, if Chloe hadn't been paying real close attention to the newspaper article that said the deer Jodie killed died from unknown causes, our characters wouldn't have even been involved until the last 10 minutes of the episode, when Pete meets Jodie for their date. So much time is spent watching Jodie weigh herself, eating, cutting the heads off supermodels. I like Chloe's line about that, by the way. Kind of redundant, isn't it? And yes, for the commentary to work, we need some of that. But being a series about specific people, it also has to be about them. How does what Jodie's doing affect them? Well, I guess Pete's trying to date her. That's something. Too bad that development happened so late in the episode. This is easily solved. Just have Pete and Jodie become an item toward the beginning of the episode and let Clark and Chloe get involved in what's happening with her because they notice her strange behavior as she spends time with Pete, and then probably as she avoids Pete. Not a drastic change, just give our characters more to do than simply investigate and or get knocked unconscious and or fight the Kryptofreak and or watch stuff blow up. The prosthetics on Jodie are good, but she just doesn't look 250 plus pounds. Had it been me, I would have used two different actresses, just as an older and younger actor were used for Henry Volk in the last episode. Once again, Clark's feeling pretty guilty about the meteor shower, this time with Lex, who finally shares how he was turned bald. And yes, I'm probably going to mention this every single time it happens. It annoys me enough, I probably should be counting it. I won't go into great detail about how much I don't really care about Lana's birthday party and how Nell's being a selfish brat again and how lame it is that the only conflict Clark deals with until his 5-second confrontation with this week's Kryptofreak is what gift to get Lana for her birthday. Nor will I complain for minutes on end about how Whitney is only a nice and sensitive boyfriend when the script wants Lana to be mad at Clark about something. But once again, when Clark has a perfectly good reason for not being somewhere he told Lana he'd be, he gives her no explanation whatsoever. This is going to be a pretty unsettling trend. Not just that he'd say nothing at all, but that he has a witness and still won't say anything. Pete was conveniently unconscious and woke up just in time to see Clark walk away from a burning greenhouse holding Jodie. So why can't Clark just tell Lana as much as Pete knows? I mean, Pete didn't ask any questions that would make anyone think Clark used any superpowers, so why would that be compromising? Just say, I'm sorry I wasn't here, I saved a girl from a burning greenhouse, just like I saved Lex from that car wreck and Whitney from that car explosion, etc., etc. You know, all those times he miraculously saved people and she never for a second thought maybe he had superpowers. Oh wait, that won't work, because the writers want Lana to be mad at him. Because we like it when Lana's mad at Clark. That's like dramatic or something. And questions to ask Jor-El when I get to heaven. At one point, Clark says Scout's honor. Is Clark an actual Boy Scout? If so, why does this never come up again? It makes sense, and it would give him a hobby, which he's severely lacking in most of the series. Just how much kryptonite is enough to actually hurt Clark? I'm confused. He's standing in a greenhouse full of the stuff. He looks dizzy. Then when Jodie blows it up, he effortlessly super speeds her out of there. In previous episodes, he would be lying on the floor incapable of doing much of anything, if even just a rock or two were lying next to him. And let's jump over to the scoreboard. We've got one new Kryptofreak this week. That's Jodie Melville. She gets her powers with Kryptonite plus veggies, and that equals Violator. Her villain motivation is, I'm so hungry I could eat that guy. We've got one car crash this week when Jodie hits that deer and then eats it. We've got one instance of Clark being affected by green kryptonite in Jodie's greenhouse toward the end. And we've got two instances of people being conveniently unconscious so they don't see Clark using his powers. One is Jodie during the explosion when Clark super speeds away, and the other is, of course, Pete when Jodie attacks but doesn't have the chance to suck his body fat, and so he misses that explosion entirely. I'm going to rate Craving a 2.5 out of 4. The Kryptofreak has potential and is well acted, but there's just not enough for our main characters to do. Was there an item I missed in any category? Send me a personal message on Geekvolution on YouTube, and I'll be sure to add it to the count. I'm Captain Logan, and consider this episode counted.